Congressman Morgan Griffith, the 9th District, Virginia, from Salem, Virginia, Republican. Congressman Griffith, great to have you with us, sir.
Great to be with you.
Congressman, let me get your thoughts. You're a congressman. Yesterday, one of your colleagues, Juan Castro, in San Antonio, where he has constituents there, he sends out a docs list on Twitter of max donors to Trump, the Trump 2020 campaign. These are people that donated $2,900, which I believe is the maximum federal opportunity to donate. Some business owners, some retirees, some like the president. By the way, they're his constituents, Castro, Representative Castro. And he sends this out on Twitter with their names and their addresses. Of course, this information can be found publicly because you have to disclose that. But what was the purpose of Castro doing that? What was he attempting to achieve by that?
Well, there's no question he's at the very least attempting to stifle free speech, which is part of what we do in this country. He's trying to say to these folks that, we're going to target you at least for public ridicule, if not worse.
Just what shocks me is he's a congressman, and these are his constituents. So it's like he's attempting to, intimidate. I think it was Tim Murtaugh from the Trump campaign said it best. He says, at best, he wants these people to be publicly harassed. That's at best. We don't even want to contemplate the worst, but those are his constituents. I saw that, and, it's like you get older and you say, I've seen it all. And then you see that and you say, no, I haven't seen it all. Now I saw this. I just, for the life of me, can't believe why a congressman would do that to his own constituents.
Well, I don't understand that either. It is information that's available. There was a list put out of, all the donors. It's out there online, but most people don't pay attention to that. I can tell you who in my neighborhood gave to Elizabeth Warren, but I'm not planning on putting it out there on the internet.
Mm-hmm. Well, there'd be no reason to that other than to incite harassment at best. Let's leave it at that. It at that, Morgan Griffith. Now, you've got several of your colleagues asking for the Congress to come back in session in order to deal with guns and white nationalism. How do you respond to that?
Well, I've always felt like the August break needs to go away. So, from that standpoint, I don't mind coming back to D.C. Everybody needs time to have a vacation. I get that. And take some time in their district. I get that. But we'll be gone 5 weeks. So we really ought to do away with the August break. It was created at a time when there was no air conditioning in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. And maybe they were anticipating, the Democrats were, that, EPA would shut down air conditioning and we would need this long break. So from a perspective of coming back to Washington, I don't have any problem with that. On the other side of the coin, calling us back in to deal with a situation that has occurred is not going to solve that problem, and it's just political theater. So the reason for them calling us back, I don't find is we'll be able to do anything in 2 weeks that we haven't already done or that we won't do in the next few months. So I think it's just political theater, but I do think that we're out of D.C. too long, and if we were there, issues like this that come up could be dealt with while we're there. That's just my feeling on it.
Congressman Griffith, President Trump 2 days ago advocating that we take some action on guns in response to these horrific shootings that now seem to happen almost on a weekly basis. A lot of people getting numb to it, but when you start shooting kids in a Walmart, it's a little close to home. We got moms now buying backpacks for 5-year-olds with bulletproof backpacks and teaching them how to shield themselves. Kind of reminds me of when I'm 61. I remember we'd have the nuclear drills where you would go into the desk and then you would find the shelter to go in. I remember the sirens going off and doing that, and it was kind of scary at in the 5th or 4th grade. And now we're buying backpacks with bulletproof vests in them. The president advocating we do two things. Number one, tighten background checks for gun sales, and number two, really expand the red flag laws so that whack jobs like this nutbag in Dayton can't buy a gun. I'm personally in favor of a federal law increasing the age to buy a long gun to 21 like they did in Florida and like, quite frankly, we have in Virginia. I would be in favor of that. But the president believes that we have to do something in order to tighten these up, and maybe it can stop a shooter, save a life. I mean, it's hard to sit there and say, well, the constitutional right of some nutball, crazy young fella in Dayton who posted a rape list on social media when he was in high school and had a list of people he was going to shoot and shut the school down for a day, would be able to walk in and buy an assault weapon, an automatic rifle, and a 100 magazine clip, and just like, here, buy it, 3-day wait, thanks for the cash. I mean, it seems inconceivable to me that he would be able to do that. What is wrong with the president's proposals?
Well, I don't know that there's anything wrong in general principle. The background checks should be tighter in the sense that we have lots of loopholes. We have lots of people who haven't been doing what they're supposed to get the people on the list. The Texas shooter from a couple of years ago, had spent a year in jail for domestic violence and was barred from being able to buy a gun. But the Air Force, that had put him in the brig, never put it on the list of folks who can't buy a gun. Somebody failed to do the paperwork. It also happened in the Virginia Tech shootings. Now, that was a glitch in the law because one set of people thought the judge was going to do it, and the judge thought the other folks were going to do it. The court services people were going to do it, and the law was unclear, and we straightened that out in the state legislature. But again, he was not supposed to be eligible to buy a gun, but he was able to. So we do need to tighten up these background checks and make sure people who we know are dangerous aren't on the list. We also, from the Ohio situation, have learned we got to make sure we put juveniles on the list, and I think that has to be a case-by-case basis. But the judges need to be able to say, take his right away as a part of their action. When you see something like this guy in Ohio who had the opportunity, to do this because nobody took action when he was 17 to keep him from being able to buy a gun. In that sense, the president's absolutely right on background checks. Red flag laws. Look, the English common law, which came over to Virginia and which, it was the basis of most states' laws in the United States. Get out west, you get some civil law in. It says you can take away a person's freedom if they're a danger to themselves or others or substantially unable to take care of themselves. And those hearings take place every day. The state has a way to do that. The key is that what the Democrats have proposed on a national basis never includes adequate due process. If somebody comes in and makes that allegation, whether it be a family member, a friend, or a police officer, you need to be able to have a court hearing to make a determination that it wasn't something that was arbitrary and capricious or even malicious. I mean, think of the situation of a couple that's going through a divorce, and one of the parties wants to, really get to the other one, and so they tell, oh yeah, she's dangerous, I don't trust her. A court can hear those things and make a decision. Now, in the short run, you go and you take the weapons away, but then you give that person a hearing. You can actually take their children away for up to 5 days without having a hearing. It would seem to me if you get into court within 5 days, that preserves your due process. Now, the big question becomes, how are we going to operate red flag laws at the federal level? We do not have judges trained in that area. The juvenile and domestic relations district judges, the general district judges in Virginia are already dealing with some of this. The circuit judges are already dealing with some of this. I think it's probably better that we encourage the states to do it. And if we have to pass a law that says, funding would be tied to passing something akin to that, as long as due process is involved, I have no problem with red flag laws. It's ancient, common sense reasoning when you have somebody who's a danger to themselves or to others.
Look, Congressman Morgan Griffith, that makes a tremendous amount of sense. And the 5-day rule, you're right. I mean, you're a lawyer. You know this. I mean, it applies to children. You can be going through a domestic dispute or divorce, and one spouse can file something, And I think there's a name for it. I don't remember what it is. One of my friends went through it. They can file something, and you can lose your kids for up to 5 days. That's the max. Then you have to have a hearing. And in order to go further with that, the one that made the complaint's got to prove it. And if it isn't, the judge throws it out. So, I mean, if they can do that with kids, they can do it with guns, right? Or they can do it with the ability to buy a weapon or anything else. So I think that should come from the state. That seems to be something that we ought to be able to do. But you got to start somewhere. And, my beef here with Republicans in Virginia is the president comes out with this, and immediately the VCDL, Van Cleve, the local chapters of the National Rifle Association come out. They blast the president's proposals. They say it's going to open up a can of worms. It's unconstitutional. It's going to take your rights away. It's going to lead to gun confiscation. I heard the same thing with when he wanted to get rid of the bump stocks. And here's my position, okay? These are talking points from the 90s. When you've got mothers buying backpacks with bulletproof vesting in them, you got a problem, Congressman. And I think if you try to go back to the NRA talking points of the 90s and do nothing, you're going to lose elections. Because people, when you gun down shoppers in a Walmart, I mean, that's really close to home. That could have been any of us. I was in El Paso that week. I passed that thing for 3 days, right on I-10 every day, going to New Mexico. So a lot of people are concerned about this, and I don't know whether Republicans don't act on it. Say, hey, here's a good compromise. Maybe it'll save a life. Why don't we act on this?
And the bottom line is that I think what I just laid out does not violate any constitutional strictures.
Right.
But I will tell you this: there are issues, and making sure that we preserve our gun rights is one of them. That it's worth, if defending the Constitution means we lose an election, we have an awful lot of young men in our history and young women who have given up their lives to defend the United States Constitution. So it's not about the election. It's about doing something that is steeped in Anglo-American jurisprudence. The rules are already set. We just haven't applied those rules appropriately to guns, but the rules are all out there, and they were there when the Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution. The Founding Fathers would have never said somebody who is a danger to themselves or to others should have the protections of the Second Amendment. They would have never said that.
Right.
Because they knew this law. This was already well steeped in our laws when the Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution. So I don't see any conflict there. And what we need to do is quit thinking that everything that involves guns automatically is a violation of the Constitution. It's not. Now, the way the Democrats wrote their laws last winter, I think they violated the Constitution. I voted no.
Right.
But if we do it right, and I'm happy to help anybody, Democrat, Republican, or Independent, draft something up that threads that needle, make sure due process is taken care of, but takes the guns out of the hands of people who are a threat to themselves or to others.
Why doesn't Morgan Griffith sponsor that bill?
Well, I might have to get that drafted up.
You're going to have to do it. See, the only person and I told this to Senator Chase in Virginia. It's like when Richard Nixon went to China. The only person who can do one of these is those serving right now that Republicans trust on guns, right? If you're in Virginia and you vote in state elections, I don't think there's a candidate out there other than that is going to beat Amanda Chase on guns. She carries one wherever she goes, including in the well. So people trust her on it. People trust Morgan Griffith on guns based on your history, where you're from, the area you're from, your record. So if you were to draft something like this and do it the right way, it would be a starting point to go on. And I encourage you to do that because it just makes sense for people. No one in their right mind believes that this crazy nutball in Dayton, Ohio, should have had access to a high-powered weapon based on all the things he said he did. And so he just went in. He just went in and was able to buy it because the laws are not tight enough for that. Here's a question from Amy in Fairfax. Says, Congressman Griffith, how do you have red flags that don't violate HPPA laws?
This is outside of right now when we're dealing with people where we say we're going to put you into a mental health hospital or mental health ward because you're a danger to yourself or others. Does not violate HIPAA. And I suppose you could argue that if you're putting it out there online that violates HIPAA. I would argue to the contrary because, and that's for those who don't know, that's the health protections that we're not revealing your health diagnosis. We just put you on the list as far as the public knows. It could be for any number of reasons. There are a lot of people who are on the list, way back when they had a domestic violence issue, they've been convicted of a felony. There are other things that are already there. So just putting you on the list doesn't mean that we are revealing your mental health status. But a court makes that determination, and those documents then are the basis for taking away your right to buy guns. So I don't see it as any violation of HIPAA. If we have to make a change on that, that's a federal law. We can change that too.
All right, here's a question, Congressman. There's been you're getting a lot of interaction here. Here's a question from Mike in Richmond, who says, "What does Congressman Griffith think about adding some sort of recourse for falsely accusing someone to curb abuse of the law in the bill that he's going to write?" So now I've started a trend that you're now going to have to write this bill, which of course will put out on social media that you are going to write the bill. So how do you respond to that?
Well, you don't want to dissuade people from bringing legitimate claims, so you have to be careful with that. The courts rarely do it. They do have the option to bring sanctions when a frivolous suit or an improper suit is brought, and the individual could sue, I believe, for a form of trespass, but if we need to include that in a code section, that can be done. Where because they've taken your guns, even if it's an improper case, for that 5 days they've denied you the opportunity to have your property. I believe you could create a trespass statute. People don't realize trespass is not just criminal; it can also be a civil action, and then the person could sue. Most of the time, however, what you're going to see is it's just a whole lot easier to let it go or to bring it up, particularly if it's part of a domestic case. You bring it up in the court to show that the person is acting in bad faith, and then that helps you in other ways like custody of children or even some property issues that may come up.
Scott in Hampton says, Congressman Griffith, changes need to address the culture that incubates mass killers. This is what Bannon was saying yesterday, that parents should have some level of accountability. Sidebar. He goes on to say, as well as their access to guns, beware of Democrats. To them, every solution is an opportunity to concoct a new problem. That's from Scott in Hampton. I think what you're saying is that if you were to write this red flag law, you would do it in such a way that the states would have the ability to adjudicate this. And look, if this was done in Ohio, the way you've just outlined it, Congressman, at the federal or state level, that guy would not have access to this weapon. And I just don't see where any gun rights advocate would object to this kid not getting a high-powered rifle with a 100 magazine clip.
Yeah, I would agree, but I would tell you that just because you have a law doesn't mean he doesn't get a gun. It doesn't mean he doesn't do bad things. I mean,
right.
Let's remember that school shooting where the shooter didn't have a right to get guns and stole.
Yeah, he stole it from his mother
and killed his mother.
Yeah, no, I get it. Look, it's I just think we should try something, and I think if you write this bill, and I know you'll get a co-sponsor for it, because everybody knows what goes on in D.C. You write the bill, you try to present it. As soon as the Democrats get a hold of it, they add 19 amendments on it, and it becomes something it isn't, and that's the end of it. So, but
and we have to find the right way to incentivize the states, because I really do believe that the federal courts do not have they don't deal with these types of issues on a regular basis,
right.
Whereas your family courts or your domestic relations courts and your general district courts deal with this stuff on a regular basis in Virginia and other states. And so that's really where you need to be making these decisions. But we need to have some laws that incentivize the states to do it. And that means, we can tie it to some money that maybe they're already receiving, or that, they're spending so much anyway on stuff that I don't think is worthwhile. Maybe we can take some of that money and put it into this project.
Great segment. Congressman Morgan Griffith, Republican, 9th District, Southwest Virginia, from Salem, Virginia. Congressman, always great to have you on. Great discussion, sir. Thank you. You're the
Thank
best.
you.
Thank you so much.